The wide receivers to target and avoid, part 2. We now have athletic testing, official measurements, speed scores, RAS numbers, all that good stuff to run these wide receivers through the FSC prospect model gauntlet. I did the running backs yesterday. Make sure to check that out. And also make sure to leave a like and subscribe down below if you guys enjoy this. Hopefully, I'm in Mexico by now, by the time you guys are watching this. But let's get into it. Again, like I did in the running back video, a quick disclaimer that I'm not going to go over any of the, thought process behind the prospect model. That stuff is in the wide receivers to target and avoid part 1. So if you want to check that out, definitely go ahead and do that. And I will link that down below in the description. This one should be a lot swifter, a little bit of a shorter video than the running back one because 1, we have a worse class at wide receiver than we do at running back. And 2, the top 3 receivers in my rankings did nothing at the combine. Tet McMillan from Arizona, Travis Hunter from Colorado, and Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State are all opting to, do their stuff at their pro days and kind of see what happens there. So let's talk about some of the big names. We'll talk about the big risers. I'll talk about and order these guys basically in the order of how much their grade went up in the FSC prospect model from part 1 of this video. And of course, part 3 of this video will be post-draft when we have real draft capital. We have real, concrete information on everything there. So the talk of the town after the combine at the wide receiver position is Hook'em Horns, Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden, who blazed a 4.29 in the 40-yard dash. Most of the NFL draft community is kind of spouting some nonsense right now, like he's the best receiver in the class or whatever. I like Matthew Golden. He's a great player, but he's my wide receiver 5 in the class, very closely ranked to my wide receiver 4, Luther Burden, who I'll talk about in a second. I don't think an NFL team is going to take him over Tet McMillan or Emeka Egbuka, but I could be wrong, man. I wouldn't be shocked if this dude ends up being a top 15 pick after running that fast, having the tape that he has. And like I said, for me, he's the wide receiver 5 in this class, basically the same grade as Burden. But let's contextualize things here. He had a 1.5% increase in his grade because he didn't jump, because he didn't do agilities. But keep in mind, I'm not factoring in any draft capital, increases because he had early second-round draft capital before the combine. It is currently at late first-round draft capital as of now. But if we're talking about a dude that goes 12th overall to the Cowboys or something, then it jumps to a 3 to 4% increase in his grade simply by the fact that he ran a 4.29, and his RAS score of 7.88 is kind of being weighed down by the fact that he doesn't really have great size. So if he does run good agilities, good jumping drills at Texas's pro day, then we're talking about a guy that'll probably have a higher RAS score as well. So his comps haven't really changed. I talked about Ladd McConkey, Zay Flowers, Brandon Ayuk, kind of these like film bro guys coming out when they're prospects. Those are all comparable prospects. They had holes in their prospect profile. They're relatively the same size. Matthew Golden, the type of dude that you probably want to watch the film on before you make a firm distinction. Is this guy worth the hype? Is he not worth the hype? But definitely a guy that showed out at the combine. Another guy, and to me, this was the biggest winner of the NFL Scouting Combine, was Jayden Higgins, wide receiver from Iowa State. A 4% increase to his FSC prospect model grade, a 9.87 relative athletic score, comes in at a true 6'4". This is so crucial to me. Every time we get a 6'4" receiver, we've been disappointed. We get a 6'2.5" at the combine. True 6'4", 214 pounds. He was actually 217 at the Senior Bowl. 4.47 in the 40-yard dash, 39-inch vertical, 10.8 in the broad. Excellent, production as a prospect to go along now with the athleticism. His best comparable players, you can see here, are worse athletes than him for the most part. I mean, Josh Doxson was a first-round pick, was a good athlete as well, but he's a little bit smaller than Jayden Higgins, definitely less productive than Jayden Higgins. Mike Williams and Michael Pittman, production-wise, a little bit more similar, but he is a better athlete than both of those guys. I've seen people float the Nico Collins comparison. Nico wasn't nearly as productive at Michigan as Jayden Higgins was at Iowa State, so very excited for how he tested here. Very excited for the athleticism. If he ends up being the 73rd overall pick in the draft, which I don't think will keep up, I think we're talking about a top 50 player now. We're going to be talking about a guy going even higher. Like if he gets top 50 capital in his grade, he'll probably jump up to the high end of the wide receiver 2 upside tier. So I'm very excited. I had him wide receiver 6 going into the combine, and he definitely lived up to the expectations. Jalen Royals, a guy that Danny is really high on, had a 9.03 relative athletic score. He ran a 4.42, had pretty good size at 6 foot, 205 pounds. He's a small school guy, so his production profile takes a bit of a hit, but being comped to Tyler Johnson, Deebo Samuel, Chris Godwin, these kind of like third round guys, fourth round guys in Tyler Johnson's case that ended up being, pretty productive dudes. 2 Tampa Bay Buccaneers on that list as well. Feel pretty good about Jalen Royals, especially in a class where we're searching for more wide receivers after those first 5, 6, 7 names. I think Jalen Royals will probably pop up to the top of a lot of people's draft boards and a lot of people's lists. So I feel good about what he did at the NFL Scouting Combine. Same goes for Jack Bech of TCU. Obviously had a great Senior Bowl already, so he's starting to build some momentum this offseason. Had really an excellent combine all around. 9.48 relative athletic score. Of course, he did not run a 40 time, which he probably wouldn't have ran that fast, so I kind of get the strategic play there by Jack Bech. 214 pounds, 6'1", 19 reps of 225 was the second most of any wide receiver there. So very strong player, which kind of suits his play style. Also a good agility score too. So it's kind of proving that the route running ability that you see, the zone coverage beating ability that Jack Bech has on tape is not a fugazi. He actually does have that agility to his game. I know these comps don't really do him a whole lot of justice here. Kenny Golladay, Jalen Polk, Jalen Reagor, not a whole lot of excitement there, but Kenny Golladay I don't actually think is a terrible one. And as you can see, Bech, prior to him actually running a 40, if he does it at his pro day, the best athlete of that group. And as I've talked about with Bech already, I mean, when he was a freshman at LSU, before he transferred to TCU, it was him, Brian Thomas Jr., and Malik Neighbors, and Bech had the best production, and he was also a 3-star recruit versus 4-star recruits for both of those guys. So definitely an encouraging part of his profile. Another big-time winner, I would say, just from the real-life NFL standpoint. His prospect profile is not that great, but Jaylin Noel of Iowa State, the teammate of Jayden Higgins, 9.72 relative athletic score, 5'10", 194 pounds, ripped up 23 reps of 225. Definitely has some short arms, so it kind of makes some sense there, but 4.39 in the 40-yard dash, 41.5-inch vert, 11.2 broad jump, had excellent agilities as well. Athleticism-wise, this dude looks like the complete package. The problem is that his prospect profile doesn't really show that, and his best comparable players are De'Ami Brown and Devin Duvernay and John Mechie. Again, he's the best athlete of all those guys, so that's definitely encouraging. He's projected 92nd overall draft capital. I think that's about where he'll get drafted as well. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with Jaylin Noel, but exciting that he had a good combine performance nonetheless. Should help us get some more draft capital wide receivers in this class, in a class that after the first 8 to 10 guys is lacking, to be honest, at this position. Elic Ayomanor of Stanford, I will go out on a limb here and say that even though he only had a 2% increase in his prospect model grade, I think he had the absolute best case scenario happening for him, because with Ayomanor, it was within the range of outcomes in my mind that he could have ran pretty slow, affected his draft capital, not really had that great of an athletic profile, had like a 7.5 RAS score. Him coming out here with a 9.56 is huge for his projection at the next level. He played X receiver in college. I think he was better to be a big slot in the NFL, but this kind of proves that he can play all over the formation given this athletic profile. Elite jump scores, 4.47 in the 40. For a guy that I think deep speed was definitely a question for a lot of NFL teams. He now profiles a lot closer to like Zay Jones, Brandon Ayuk. Again, you got one big hit there with Brandon Ayuk, one guy who's been productive for fantasy, but not uber productive for fantasy. Ayomanor, if you guys recall, was in the flex plays territory. So he actually went up a tier into the wide receiver 3 upside. So even though it was just a 2% increase, hit rate wise, we're talking about a much better tier to be a part of. And also his comps before were like Chris Godwin and Michael Thomas, and he's now projected kind of like top 50 NFL draft capital. So I feel so good about Ayomanor. Obviously Canadian, so we got to stand for him, but I feel really good about what he did at the Combine. I think probably other than Jayden Higgins, he would be one of my biggest considered winners of the Combine. I had him wide receiver 7 going in. Doesn't affect his grade a whole lot. I might move him up a little bit because the athleticism was a little better than I expected. But for the most part, I feel really, really good about what he was able to do. Torrey Horton, Colorado State wide receiver. Apparently he like mulled retirement at one point, but he was very productive for like 5 years. Up 2% on his prospect profile as well. 9.4 relative athletic score. He's a flex play caliber guy. We're not talking about a great wide receiver class here. Let me just completely contextualize this with, yeah, he rates decently in this wide receiver class, but generally speaking, it's a down wide receiver class. But that's a good thing too, because it could mean he gets drafted in the 3rd round, maybe even the 2nd round of the actual NFL draft. Try not to freak out here and see Amon-Ra St. Brown's name and think that he's going to be the next Amon-Ra. Again, 6'2", 196, probably going to play the big slot role in the NFL. He's going to be anywhere between Rashard Higgins, former Browns wide receiver, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, I don't think he actually has Amon-Ra upside, but nonetheless, being in that company means that you're probably a decent sleeper prospect to grab in the third round of rookie classes. So definitely keep in mind with Torrey Horton that he's a great athlete. He was very productive. Yeah, he's older. Yeah, it was a small school and all that stuff, but encouraging nonetheless. Trey Harris of Ole Miss, of course, infamously has a 5.15 yards per route run. Wide receiver 2 upside prospect. Again, we're talking about a guy that's pretty highly ranked in this class. I believe he's the wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 4 in the model. Sterling Shepard and Michael Pittman were his comps before, so nothing really changed there. But he did go up a little bit because I said in the previous video that Trey Harris might test poorly. And while he didn't run that fast, he ran a 4.54, which is about kind of exactly what I expected. I was encouraged to see that his explosive grade of 38.5 in the vert, 10.5 in the broad was there, because I thought it was possible that he might not test that highly in that regard. He comes in at a clean 6'2", 205 as well, so he has good size, has decent speed, not great speed, but decent speed, and pretty good explosiveness ability. So feel good about Trey Harris doing what he did. I think he's definitely a riser, probably a guy borderline locked into like a second-round pick as well. Luther Burden, of course, infamously one of the top receivers in this class, but he didn't really rise all that much. I think what Luther Burden did at the combine was to be expected. 4.41 in the 40-yard dash. I expected him to be fast. 6 foot, 206, actually a little bit undersized compared to what he was listed at. I think he was 6 foot 211. Listed weight there. He didn't do any agility drills, which I would have loved to see him do, and also didn't do any of the jumps, which I also would have loved to see him do. So kind of a mixed bag here. He'll probably do some of that stuff at his pro day. His comps are the same as they were before. He's going to be anywhere between Laviska Shenault and DJ Moore. That's exactly the type of prospect, boomer bust wise, that we're talking about here. There were some losers of the NFL Scouting Combine. I think a lot of people are going to be expecting a certain name to come up here, and that would be Tez Johnson of Oregon. I'm not going to ding him for being small because I knew he was small. 154 pounds, he was 156 at the Senior Bowl. It's not like he's, all of a sudden small. He was small the whole time. However, he ran 4.51 when his faster or slower time over on Underdog was 4.35. So he went below expectations. Underdog isn't in the business of losing cash, and they expected him to run a lot faster, as did most people. 4.51 is simply not good enough. I do remember Tank Dell doing something similar. We all thought he was going to run in the 4.3s. He ran 4.49. However, Tank Dell, as small as he is 15 pounds or 10 to 15 pounds heavier than Tez Johnson. Great that he did a good, agility drills, elite and the 3-cone. Great jumping drills as well. Tez Johnson's still a good player, but we're talking about a guy who is completely outside historical precedent right now. If he hits at the next level, he will be one of one. No other receiver of this size profile has hit to this level. He is very comparable to Atwell, Marvin Mims kind of guy, but we just don't see those guys translate at the pro level very, very often. And then we got talk is cheap, Isaiah Bond. We had one Texas wide receiver keep his mouth shut, and he ran a 4.29, and then we had another Texas wide receiver saying he was going to, beat the shit out of Xavier Worthy's record, and he ran a 4.41. So I think that's probably going to hurt his profile because, I knew he was fast. 4.41 is not really surprising to me. But the fact that he came out and said that he was going to run like 4.19 or something like that, I don't know if that's going to hurt his draft capital or not. I just think it's funny, frankly, because Isaiah Bond, didn't really do a whole lot at Texas when we all thought he was going to do a lot. He said he was going to do a whole lot at the Combine, didn't actually do a lot. So it's kind of, apropos given what he actually was supposed to do at the NFL Scouting Combine at the University of Texas. He ran a lot slower than people expected, but, I understand it. Ricky White of UNLV came up and ran slow, 4.62. Not great for him. I've been on Knucklehead watch with him. Danny seems to like him, but I'm not super sold on Ricky White. Didn't really have the greatest combine. He actually lost 2% on his combine grade, so that's not great. And then Juice Wells, who ever since his junior season has kind of been slowly tumbling downhill as a prospect, and he actually lost, I believe, 1% or 2% in his grade as well. So probably guys that end up going day 3, maybe even late day 3. Definitely not great. If anybody's looking for sleepers in this wide receiver class, there's definitely 2 guys that stand out. Ty Felton of Maryland had a great day, 9.6 RAS score, 39.5-inch vert, 10.10 broad, 4.38 in the 40-yard dash. Great runs and great, athleticism altogether. He is a waiver wire prospect from a production standpoint, though. So, I mean, even including this athleticism, we're not talking about a guy who's highly regarded as a prospect production-wise. Same goes for Savion Williams of TCU. 9.81 RAS score so far. Didn't do any agilities, didn't do any jumps. But I just don't think he's that good of a player. I mean, he would have produced if he was a good player. That's really the bottom line. There was a lot of receivers. Like, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I do this for a living. I didn't even heard of some of these guys. So this wide receiver class, I feel like they really scraped the bottom of the barrel to get all these guys at the NFL Scouting Combine. I looked into some of these guys that had good RAS scores, and frankly, they just don't matter. Like, their prospect profiles aren't good. You feel free, if you guys have a wide receiver prospect that tested well at the Combine that you feel like I'm overlooking right now, feel free to leave it in the comments, and I will absolutely do my research and come back to you on that player. But as of now, I feel like anybody who tested well that I didn't mention is probably not worth really talking about for the most part. Again, I'm willing to be wrong. If you tell me, hey, there's this dude that actually produced at a high level, had this good athleticism, and you need to look into him more, I will definitely do my due diligence on that. But running back video, more interesting than this one. Like I said, we had the top names not, test. Tet McMillan, Travis Hunter, and Emeka Egbuka test. This wide receiver video would probably be a little bit more interesting, but let me know what you guys think of the video, what happens with the prospect model, all that good stuff. If you want access to the prospect model, it won't be updated right away with Combine information. I think what I'm going to do most likely is wait until after some pro days happen and then maybe start getting those numbers in. Let me know what you guys want to do. If you are Flock Fantasy subscribers, of course, you'll have access to that. Let me know in the comments if you want to see that stuff right away or if you want to just wait until after the pro days to get that stuff in. Version 2 of the draft guide will be coming out in a couple of weeks. That'll be all updated with Combine information. All of that stuff is available over on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for any of the purchases. 7 days for free, 30% off. You get 6 months for free when you sign up annually. That'll cover you with our draft guides through the Dynasty rookie draft season and into the redraft season if you sign up annually. You also get a voucher for a free team review and a free buy-sell hold report when you sign up annually as well. So definitely check that out if you guys are interested. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I was going to rope in like quarterback and tight end stuff, but to be honest with you, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about. I mean, Harold Fannin kind of ran slower than people thought. Most of the tight ends didn't end up testing, so we'll have to wait for pro days for Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren and a bunch of dudes that we were all waiting to see testing. The tight end position just overall wasn't that interesting outside of Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, who I'm going to have to watch some tape on because he tested really well. Quarterback-wise, again, Shedeur didn't throw, and Cam Ward didn't throw. Jackson Dart looked decent from what I saw. Dylan Gabriel, Tyler Shaw from Louisville, those guys looked decent, but for the most part, the quarterback and tight ends were pretty uninteresting at the NFL Scouting Combine. If you guys had other takeaways at those positions, leave them in the comments. But with that being said, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.